my name is Sam. Thanks for checking out this video. If you get to the end and liked it, subscribe, bell notification, thumbs up. Sorry, I look hot and sweaty. We got sun today. Huzzah! And for like half of my walk, it was freezing because it was in the shade. And then the other half hour of the walk, when I was walking the dogs, it was like hella hot. So like I had a hat on and everything's just hot right now. I'm officially on holidays now too, so I'm going to keep reading lots, hopefully. And yeah, so I read 7 books this week. I'm really proud of myself. 1 a day average, and let's talk about it. So first off this week, I finally read a book by Sharon Biggs Waller. I picked up A Mad Wicked Folly. I've owned this book for a long time. I got it off Book Outlet probably like 2+ years ago now. And I kind of hate myself for waiting as long to read it as I did because I really, really enjoyed this. I mean, I read just generally across the board. All the books I read this week were really, really good. This reminded me of a movie that I can't for the life of me remember what it was called. But it was this whole movie. I think the actress name was like Emily Brown. She was in was it Sucker Punch? With Vanessa Hudgens, that like dark movie. I think her name's Emily Brown. She was in it, and it's this whole thing about artists and their muses and all that stuff. The movie itself was messed up, but it really reminded me a lot of that movie. So our main character is big into art. She's in France doing a finishing school, and she makes the awful decision that everyone in the class, that her art class that she's not even supposed to be attending though, in all honesty, has posed nude, and then their model doesn't show up, so she volunteers / is kind of like, everyone's like, well, you haven't done it, so she decides to go nude and do it. Someone finds out and sends the news back to her finishing school, so her father brings her back to England. And it is all about the suffragette movement in England at the time, as well as this kind of barrier into education, as well as art world for women. And so this reminded me a lot of that art movie, as well as Bringing Down the Duke a little bit, because there is a little bit of a romance. Her father is absolute garbage. I hated him this whole book. Like, there's just so much, and I know it's the time period, but there's just so much inherent sexism that if anyone even, like, I mean, like, I feel like it's different to, like, say things to someone's face versus, like, knowing that the society, like, understands it. But for your father to be like, no, your job is to marry and give birth to children. Now, but, like, and burn stuff down. So, I found her a little bit frustrating, but again, it's of the time period that she, like, kind of just took it and then tried to find ways around it in the background. I kind of really detested her mother. I don't know if it was more than the father, because the mother, it explains there of, like, that she should have been there to support her daughter in some capacity. And I feel like the small ways that she did just really didn't do anything for me. I don't know if it was supposed to make her seem, like, slightly like a slightly less bad person or parent. I don't know. But I really enjoyed this. I liked the relationship between the main character, Victoria, and her father. I really like that this book pointed out, too, the sexism from Queen Victoria. Because I feel like we have this idealized version of, like, oh, she was this female queen. Like, she was all woke and, like, married her cousin. We're gonna pretend that's not a thing. Weird now. She was adamantly against a lot of the suffragette movements, and now I'm like, now that I know that, like, I've learned a lot of that stuff in the last, like, 2 years or so, just through, like, historical fiction, and then looking up things that people reference in these books. I'm like, wow, Queen Victoria was kind of a bitch. way to promote, like, women ruling things. I don't know how you, like, are a queen and, like, fought so adamantly to have, like, your own rule and your own position and, like, be your own human while ruling, but then you're like, nah, those women that want, like, kind of the same thing as me, nope. I just really, really, like, wanted to slap her a few times in history. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. Like, pleasantly surprised. I detest the covers of this series. The publisher absolutely did not read the book before giving it to, like the cover artist or the student intern that they were like, find a girl in a dress and we'll cover her face up. Both of the covers I've seen are that. They're deplorably bad and completely lacking in any coordination with the content itself. So I don't know who is, Penguin Teen, I guess. Y'all messed the hell up on these covers. This is the stupidest cover for this book. Like a deplorably stupid cover, okay? So yeah, content itself, like 4 or 5 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed it. I'm excited to read some more by this author. I know I've heard some people say, like, well, technically those books sell better. I legit don't know how they find out those stats as well with that, as well as, like, if they release a hardcover, and it's $27. And then they're like, oh, it didn't sell that well because we did bullcrap marketing and we didn't really promote and we didn't do pre-order swag and we didn't do any pre-order campaign or author tours. Let's cheapen the cover and then make the book cheaper. Of course more people are going to buy the book when it's $14 instead of $27. Like, are you like... Then I picked up the first book in the Mr. Max series, The Book of Lost Things by Cynthia Voigt, with illustrations by, I think it's I.A. Jacopo Bruno? I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Maybe it's Italian or Spanish. Or maybe it's supposed to be an L. I don't know. I can't tell. I think it's supposed to be an I. I-A-C-O-P-O. I have no idea how you pronounce that. If you can, like, write down how you're supposed to pronounce that below, if you know, that'd be really cool. This reminded me a lot of different book series that I read. I feel like it's got hints of, like, Nevermore and A Series of Unfortunate Events and Harry Potter, as well as just a bunch of, like, weird, oddball books and movies, like, middle grade that I read. It incorporates a lot of these elements that I feel like stood out in a lot of other series that for some reason, my brain is, like, going towards them. But our main character, it starts off that his parents get a package during dinner, and it's all of a sudden his father reads the story. His family, his mother and his father run like a carnival or a theater group in town. They're very dramatic theater people. You can tell that right away. I do wish we would have gotten more of them though. But they get a package in the mail and he says, well, we've just gotten a letter from this like sultan in India and he wants us to come and like put together a troupe of theater people for him because he's heard so much good stuff about ours. Oh, but there's only 2 tickets. And then they're like, oh no, we need 3 because we need to take our son, who is Max. And then all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, you have to go to your last art lesson or whatever. Meet us at the docks for the ship at this time and this hour. He shows up and that ship doesn't exist and his parents are missing and they need to figure out what the heck is going on. Luckily, his grandmother lives still like in the house beside them, so she can keep kind of an eye on him. But he has to figure out a way to support himself. This is definitely not in modern times, but there's no like geography super pinned to it. I kind of always like imagined it was kind of like New York, but I don't know if that's New York or Chicago, honestly. But I don't know if that's just my brain making things up because I've watched too many holiday Christmas movies and they always take place in New York and Chicago and Eldovia apparently. But he tries to make a little bit of money and he falls into this because he is trying to search what happened to his parents. He falls into this mystery path and he starts being a little bit of a Sherlock Holmes detective and discovering, you know, where, you know, certain missing spoons have gone and someone's missing dog and they all pay him. And he's also looking for his parents. I love his grandmother. She's a librarian, so I wonder why. And then he kind of slowly accumulates like a friend along the way, which is interesting because he's never really had friends. So this is a very weird, quirky book, but I feel like it's a book that I don't know how you could not like it. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot in here to just appease to the general masses. And it's really just fun and cute. I'm happy I got all of the 3 books in the trilogy from my library. And I'm definitely going to keep reading this trilogy. The illustrations were just meh to me. They didn't seem like anything special or standoutish. They're also very few and far between. I think this is it. This is my favorite one in the whole thing. But I just kind of felt the illustrations were underwhelming and pretty infrequent. There weren't enough of them. But I really enjoyed this. The writing was really solid as well. I really, really enjoyed the writing. And I liked how it ended with the mystery of his parents. I did think his parents were so interesting, though, that I was like, why did you get rid of them so early? Or not have any flashbacks with them or something, right? So I'm hoping we'll get more of them in books 2 and 3. And I'm really excited to keep reading the series. It was really enjoyable. I think I give it like a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read the second book that the TBR Beyond group voted on to read this month, Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I wanted to read the heck out of this anyways. It was already on my TBR and then I got voted in. I was like, cool, 2 birds, 1 stone. So this is supposed to be, I think, at the first in a duology. I thought, because they've already released the cover for the second book and the title and the summary, I for some reason saw Danny and didn't look at the cover. Like, I glanced at the cover and then didn't read the series. Danny is her sister. I realized that, like, within the first, like, few pages of this book. And I was like, why did I think it was her brother? The series is actually called The Brown Sisters, so I don't know why I was like, oh, it's about her brother. I don't even know what that is. I don't even know guys really named Danny. I know tons of girls named Danielle that would go by Danny. So I don't know why my brain went there. But I feel like actually it would have been cool to have one with the male romance and one with like the female romance perspectives. But either way, I'm excited for that after reading this book. I loved this. So it is Black-owned voices, and I knew that there was chronic illness and plus size rep. I didn't know until after that the chronic illness rep, I guess, is own voices, which is fantastic. I couldn't speak to the authenticity of that. I don't have chronic illness. I've never done a ton of research on it. I have friends who suffer from it, but I couldn't, like, I'm not someone to dictate its authenticity. And I know especially something like chronic illness is going to be different for each person. But my friend Melanie, who's the creator of the TBR and Beyond group, actually, she was like, I kind of cried because I've never seen that part of myself in a book. So from the sounds of it, it is very good rep. But the whole thing is she has chronic illness and she wants to strike out on her own, away from her family, and just kind of be herself. And do a bit more adventuring. She almost dies at the very beginning. And so she's like, I'm going to make a list, and these are the things I'm going to do. And so she moves into her own apartment. And then some of the other things are enjoy drunken night out, ride a motorcycle, go camping, have meaningless but enjoyable, thoroughly enjoyable sex, and travel the world with nothing but hand luggage, and do something bad. Enter the superintendent of the building, Red, who has a background in art, who's very misunderstood. I also really liked in this that they have representation of domestic abuse survival from a male perspective, because we have this and it is, the majority of stats dictate that it is generally women who are the victims of domestic abuse, but there are men who go through that, and we a lot of the times don't, maybe they themselves aren't aware that it is domestic abuse because they're technically the man in the situation, or they get kind of brushed aside of, oh, well, it was just like a spat between you and the missus because she's a woman. She couldn't really be domestically abusive. No, she's physically and emotionally abusive to him. And there's never any, like, on page, like, showing you of it. It's just a vague, like, he once mentions, like, the past of why they broke up. And that is put in there. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And it doesn't in any way, it's, those parts of them aren't meant to degrade who they are. It's meant to just say, like, this is, you know, what happened to me, this is what the situation I'm in, and this is how it's adjusted my life, right? So I really, really enjoyed that all that rep was thrown in there. There is tons of sexual tension between Chloe and Red. I loved that. And I just really enjoyed the epilogue, especially, that they slowly kind of very, I mean, it's systematic, but I feel like it's also very casual how they work through her list of things that she wants to do, and that they have so much in common. So I really liked that. I liked both Red and Chloe. Red also, in my mind, is Jamie from the Outlander series. He's redheaded, and other than being English, he basically just sounds like Jamie Fraser in a bit more modern times. So I really, really enjoyed this. I'm really excited to read the sequel, and this is going to be one I think I'll come back to pretty continuously. Then I read Winter House, and then The Secrets of Winter House, books 1 and 2. Book 3 comes out, I think, on December 31st. I'm really excited for that book to come out. First of all, I love the series because it looks like Clue, basically, with the covers, that the covers have cutouts on them. So the Underdust jackets, you can see, like, when you put it over the little faces in there from the Underdust jacket, both of them are like that. This is fun and cute and very whimsical. I would have eaten the hell out of this as like in my middle grade age when I was like the target audience for this. So our main character, her parents have died. She lives with her aunt and uncle who are super poor and pretty mentally abusive towards her. And then all of a sudden for Christmas, they get money to go on vacation, which she doesn't understand where they get from. And she's sent to this hotel, Winter House, and she shows up and there's a bunch of mysteries. And we find out, obviously, there's a lineage reveal, because you don't have an orphan without a lineage reveal in a book. And then book 2 kind of picks up on a little bit of the same mystery in Winter House, with some of the same characters, but a little bit different. I don't know if anyone else ever watched this show, but I think it was on Nickelodeon. As like a teen, or maybe like when I was middle grade-ish age, there was a show called House of Anubis. Riddled with plot holes, and made me, when I look back now, I'm like, why was a British boarding school sitting on top of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics tunnels? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But the entire premise was British boarding school, kids like in these dorm houses or whatever, or under the school, I can't remember the specifics of it now, they find like all these mysterious tunnels and everything, and they start going like snooping and finding things. This reminded me a lot of that show, though didn't have ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics mysteriously under a British boarding school, kind of flawed logic, but the mystery of like tunnels under this like ancient resort, Also, the idea of having a hotel slash resort, whatever they call it, a hotel in here. It's a resort. You eat there. There's like events and everything there. It's a resort. That has a candy factory attached to it. And a library in it, like a big ass library, not some bookshelf. That is like dream. That like, oh my god, that sounds amazing. Like to just think about, let alone the opportunity to visit that. Can you imagine waking up and just smelling chocolate and then being able to go in the library? Anyways, I really enjoyed these books a lot. I like the characters. One of the main characters, the main female character, is definitely white, but you can see a bit better on this one that the main male character is actually mixed race. He specifies that his family, he's part, at least half, Latin American, so that was great in there. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this book a ton. It has a bunch of detective, weird, whimsical shenanigans, and I really enjoyed this series so far. I'm definitely going to pick up the third book. Then I picked up Christmas Dinner of Souls. This book is so small, I was ready to be like, with the other books. By Ross Montgomery. I ordered this book last year. Someone recommended it to me on Goodreads, and I was like, oh my god, that's an adorable cover. Oh, it's super cheap. So I bought this, and last year Canada Post was on strike, and it got delivered and never appeared. It didn't even, like, normally when, like, snowbanks melt here, people find things in the snowbanks that either got blown away, or, like, the mail delivery people were just lazy and threw it on the snowbank, and were like, oh, well, I delivered it. No, I literally just, like, I never found it. So they definitely just sent it to the wrong place, or just got like dumped at their warehouse and damaged or whatever. But I eventually did get this, but after Christmas was over, and I was like, it's kind of weird to read this now. So I waited and waited patiently, and then I finally picked it up. So I really like the cover of this series. Now that I'm looking at it, even like the end pages kind of have the same kind of concept. It's like an advent calendar. It's a weird book, but I kind of really liked it. I think it sits around like a 3.5 stars. And I know that seems kind of weird, like low for a book, but I just generally kind of liked it. I don't know. It definitely leans, I think, a little bit more Halloween-y to me than Christmassy, but it's kind of amazing. You could read this really any time from like Halloween to Christmas, and I think it would be like the perfect time to be reading that. Our main character gets caught vandalizing the local college, which is like this old decrepit university that used to be like really like highly esteemed, and then it's kind of fallen into disrepair. He gets caught when his friends run away, so the dean tells him you have to come back on Christmas Day and, you know, essentially like work off the repairs of it. He shows up and all of a sudden these like weird like goblin ghoul thing professors show up, and then he's locked in, and they have this whole thing that there's some mysterious jibber jabber like teeth that have been hidden in the catacombs under the college university, and every year they have all of these professors that are a part of this club, and they all tell horror stories, and the person who tells like the scariest horror story gets to go into the catacombs to try and find it. I don't know why that would be something you would want to do, considering they've literally never had anyone come back alive, but whatever. So we go through, and all of the professors there, I think there's 7 in total, tell a story. So we get to hop in between like the scenes where like there's the dining hall where he's like the servant boy and like, oh my god, I think they're gonna kill me at the end of this, and then we listen to the stories the professors are telling. Some of the stories were meh. I didn't find them, in general, I don't think any of them were super scary, but I think some of the stories were definitely better than the others, and I think some of the scenes where they're in the dining hall and switching up meals were kind of boring to me a little bit, but I really, really liked a few of the stories, especially one of them where there's a story of this guy who has a bunch of money, but he wants land, so he marries this woman for her land, takes her on a honeymoon, kills her, and drowns her in this lake, in like on the kind of like on the precipice of her land holdings. And then when he comes back, he's like, oh no, she died, well, I guess I get all her land, and then starts taxing the hell out of his peasants. And then he keeps hearing screaming everywhere, the screams that when she killed herself, or when he killed her. So I really liked that story in particular. All of the stories are kind of messed up, but I think that one was specifically like really, really good. And the ending took a big twist. It's a very abrupt ending, though. I don't know quite why it ended so abruptly the way it did, but I think in the end I enjoyed it. If you like more like darker leaning Christmas stuff, I think this is a good one to definitely try. And I think lastly, I finally read The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex Harrow. For the longest time when I read the summary, I was like, is this a fantasy or a historical fiction? Like, is it a fantasy with a historical subgenre, or is it a historical with a fantasy subgenre? I think it's got a historical setting, but it leans a lot more to being a fantasy novel than anything else. So the 10,000 Doors of January, it's kind of difficult to explain. It's beautifully written. Absolutely beautiful writing. I also love the hell out of this cover. But so our main character January is kind of like under the guardianship of this like rich white dude. She is also black in the United States during the 18, does it specify even here? I remember it's like the 1800s of some capacity. So like racism is still very much, I mean like racism still is alive, but like a lot more like socially acceptable in the public sphere, I guess we could say, in the United States. And her father is like an adventurer, so he comes back every once in a while and he works for her guardian essentially. So she has this weird thing that she is lighter skinned. It's kind of explained throughout this book, but she isn't, she has some of these benefits that she isn't like on the darker spectrum of being black in the United States. And then she has this privilege of money and then kind of guardianship protection from this white gentleman. So it's interesting throughout this book that we see how she's treated differently than people who have and then don't have things that she has based on her skin color, which was really, really interesting. So there is obviously black rep in here. I was kind of like at this point of like, where is this book going for the first like quarter or third? And then we start dealing with this whole thing of like, she essentially with her words can control these doors, which are allow you to jump around from like places in our world and places in other worlds. And her guardian is a part of society that's been trying to close these doors, and her father has to travel through these doors to get treasure for him. So there's this whole conflict, and believing her father be dead, and then believing her guardian potentially killed him, and then finding out who her mother is exactly, and finding out where she was born, and like, there's just a whole lot that happens in the second half of this book specifically. I really love January. She's a really, really interesting character to read. She's very self-aware, she's very smart, and she's just a really, really enjoyable character. And I love her name too, that they named her January, because it's the start, like essentially like a portal into a new year, right? So they named her that because she is like a portal controller, right? It's really cool. It's very weird, and I don't know that I totally comprehended all the science and everything behind it, but I understood enough of it to comprehend what was like kind of possible and what was not kind of possible, you know what I mean? And where the realm of fantasy starts in our historical world, I feel like that was pretty easy to pinpoint. So things for the most part made sense. I liked the characters. I really liked the dialogue as well. At points I found January to be a little bit frustrating when she is under the kind of hovering protection of her guardian, who knows she has powers but she doesn't realize it, and that whole thing that he has this information she doesn't. But she's smart, and I can understand too why at the time period why she acted the way she did. She has to be careful. She is a person of color, and even though she has some protection, that protection gets removed, it's a whole other can of worms. So I thought that was really, really interesting. I really liked this. I'm gonna watch for Alex Harrow's other stuff, and I really highly recommend this book. It was really, really good. So those are all the books that I read this week. Let me know in the comment section down below what you read this week. I'd love to know. And if you've read any of these, I'd also love to know your reviews. I will link all of these books in the description box down below. I will also link all of my social media. If you follow me, I will follow you back. And have a happy holidays if I don't see you until the end of the year.